Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the BCS. My name is Nzube Ufodike, and I'm the Vice Chair of the BCS Central London branch. It is with pleasure I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion on FinTech 2.0, the new normal. We have some exciting entrepreneurs here that will be talking through their journeys, their respective experiences, and a keynote speech as well by a founder and CEO of DueDil. The BCS's purpose is to share knowledge with community and to support in the creation of the IT profession. We host events like this regularly. You can check out our website for further information on how you can engage, either as a volunteer or as a member of one of the BCS committees. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Mame-Yaa, who will run you through tonight's proceedings and introduce you to the rest of our speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Nzube. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for making time to be with us and the BCS family this afternoon. And I know it's been said 1,000 times, but of course, these are strange times. So I think the speakers that we have today are really perfectly chosen for the current situation. As we go through this event, as Nzube has already mentioned, that the BCS is very much a community focused on bringing everyone together to interrogate and investigate technology and its impact on the world. And also it's an opportunity for us to get more kind of a deeper dive into some of the pressing ethical or contemporary issues. So the proceedings for this afternoon will be, there'll be a keynote speech by Justin Kirkpatrick, followed by a panel discussion with our two guests, so the CXOs of Muse and Airtime Rewards, followed by a panel debate, and then we welcome your questions. So please feel free to enter your questions. There should be a drop down on the right-hand side where you can enter your questions, and then I will read them out as we go along through the proceedings. Without further ado, let me hand over to Justin Kirkpatrick, co-founder of DueDil, to give us our keynote speech.
Great, thanks, Mame-Yaa. I'm just going to share my screen here. Are you able to see that?
Yeah.
Terrific, great. So just a little bit about me. I guess I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur from an early age. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. However, my family's businesses were at the very low tech end of the spectrum. My parents had a bagel bakery just north of Boston, and so I grew up helping them bake bagels and bread, and we had a little restaurant in Delhi. And it was through that experience that I realized that selling my time and baking bagels was probably not something I wanted to do for a whole lot longer. And so but I became really interested in technology over that period of time. And because I wasn't in a position when I was younger to jump into being an entrepreneur with 2 feet, I began to kind of inch towards it. And I did the next best thing by going and working for some really impressive entrepreneurs. And that was really sort of the first part of my career, working for mainly US-based venture-backed entrepreneurs and helping them expand their businesses outside of the US, so into the Asia Pacific region and eventually into EMEA, which is what brought me to London. So the things, I guess, the most recent experiences that have given me, my perspective on, kind of the fintech industry and kind of technology in general is, my 2 most recent roles, one as the co-founder and now CEO of DueDil. So DueDil is a company information provider, and we are the sort of tech disruptor within our industry, which is quite an important one, but also quite old and set in its ways. I'm also one of the co-founders and former board members of Innovate Finance, which is a fintech members organization that provides the voice of global fintech. So I feel like I'm pretty well placed to share some high-level views on how financial services and fintech in particular has evolved over the last 5 or 10 years. So we're going to get into some of that. I will qualify this by saying that some of the slides that I've prepared are an extract from a previous talk I gave, which was 2 hours. And we're going to try and fly through some of this in 10 minutes. So hold on to your seats. It may or may not all make sense, but I'm very happy to have questions forwarded to me at the end and pick up the conversation later. So in terms of what we'll cover, there's sort of 3 key areas. One is obviously some of the trends that are shaping fintech and why you should care, what the future of financial services might look like, and that's kind of heavily qualified because the truth is nobody really knows, and also what it means for you. I guess on that last bit of what it means for you, the thing I would encourage you to think about as we talk about a few of these high-level themes is how the role of technology in financial services has changed and continues to change, because I think that's one of the biggest drivers in change in financial services in general is how the role of technology within it has shifted. So the 3 trends that we're going to look at are actually 3 that are very close to my heart, because these are a core part of our strategy. So these 3 trends are really insights that we have around how we think our market's changing, which helps to define our strategy. And these basically turn into levers or pillars of how we think about creating value for our clients. So the first one is machine-led. And this is really a nod to the fact that the role of API-based and microservices-based architectures is really starting to become more widely adopted within financial services, which is notorious for having quite antiquated technology stacks. People are now realizing the limitations of those technology stacks and how AI, ML, APIs, microservices can help. The second is what I refer to as ecosystem based. So we'll get into that in a minute. And the third is consent driven. So this is really things around open banking, open accounting, so on and so forth. So the first one here is a little game of spot the bank. I think traditionally we have notions of banks which are things that exist in buildings, and you go into your branch and you deposit cash and you take cash out of the ATM and all the other activities that you traditionally use banks for. But what we're seeing now as a result of technology are not only changing ideas about what a bank is, but also new entrants and alliances into the financial services market and new products and customer experiences. So our notion of what a bank is or banking services is really broadening as a result of how technology is being applied. You can see here this is a quick excerpt from a report that Accenture did. The point here is that this is not a kind of nice to have. This has fast become a must-have for anybody that's serious about their future in financial services. And so, embracing this wave of technology that we're seeing is no longer something that only early adopters can do. It's really something that everybody has to do, or they risk irrelevance. So the other point here is that as a result of new technology coming in, it's really changed the competitive landscape. And so as we saw on that first slide, there were some traditional financial services providers, but others that aren't traditionally financial services providers, like Google. Visa and MasterCard are obviously payments providers, but they're now kind of encroaching into a broader definition of the value they offer to their clients. So that's something that's really, really important to kind of think about as we watch and participate in the unfolding of this new financial services economy. One interesting thing is that when we think about disruption and we think about fintech, we tend to think about startups and venture-backed businesses. But this is a survey that was done by IBM, and it's their annual C-suite survey. So they survey about 15,000 C-suite executives globally, and they ask them a bunch of questions about their business and how they see the landscape, their industry adapting and unfolding. And one of the surprising things from this was that when you ask most executives who they're most worried about, it isn't really the startups. It's actually the biggest fear they have is that, you know, their competitors, the incumbents in the industry, are going to embrace technology and changes in technology faster than they can. And so, you know, that was sort of a counterintuitive, you know, kind of lesson that I guess I sort of discovered when I came across this piece of research. So that's something that you can kind of play into when you talk to industry incumbents, because again, it's pointing to the fact that this is no longer a nice to have, this is a must have. So just the final point, I guess, on what we mean when we think of this machine-led future in financial services. I've intentionally picked Uber because I don't believe that disruption for financial services is going to look like disruption in mobility. You know, it's not going to be a kind of Uber-like moment. However, Uber and others can teach us some interesting lessons about, you know, what's important and when disruption is likely to happen within an industry. Because if you really think about Uber and how they disrupted mobility, it wasn't from a technology edge. You know, there was no fundamental technology edge that they created for themselves. What Uber did well was they used technology to disrupt the customer experience and disrupt the traditional business model around mobility. And so, you know, we're seeing a similar thing within financial services, where, you know, a lot of the same technology is available to all of us, but the winners and losers will be the winners will be the people who apply that technology to build a better customer experience and also build a disruptive business model. Right, so ecosystems. I've chosen 3 quite large technology companies because I think technology, you know, as an industry, provides a good illustration of what we mean when we talk about ecosystems. You know, ecosystems are also not just, you know, the company going to the end customer. It's, you know, the entire ecosystem of, you know, how you think about building your product, how you think about distributing your product, you know, which technology partners you use. The key here is that ecosystems change the nature of your relationship with your customer. And there are different models available. Now, this is starting to be felt within financial services. And, you know, I think the neobanks that we all know as retail customers really started this trend around the unbundling and rebundling of financial services. So this is kind of, you know, now playing out on the consumer retail side. You know, I expect and you know, I'm already starting to see some evidence that it's now extending into the small business side of financial services. But what it means is that banking relationships are fragmenting, and so who owns the customer, where the trust resides with the customer is changing as a result of these ecosystems and the unbundling and rebundling of these products. Now, there are a couple different models available. The one that I want to zero in on is really platform. And when we talk about platform, we talk about the sort of Monzo, Starling type model where, you know, you're going to that provider to give you a core product or service. But once you're onboarded as a customer, you can access other best-in-class offerings, which aren't necessarily provided directly by, you know, Monzo or Starling. They're provided by TransferWise. They're provided by, you know, Lemonade, by Brawley, whoever it is. But, you know, you're sort of within this platform where, you know, you can go in and you can start working with best-in-class providers in a particular product line. And we're focusing on platform here, not to say that there aren't other models of ecosystem available, because this seems to be the predominant model emerging in Europe. So, you know, you can see here, you know, different attitudes. You know, there's slight differences in you know, across geographies, but, you know, platform's quite prominent across, you know, Europe, Asia, the US, but it's really the leading way that people see, you know, people in the industry see us consuming financial services in the future. Right. So final point, I know I'm kind of getting up on time here, but final point I want to make on platforms is that platforms create adjacencies. And what we talk, I'll explain what I mean by adjacencies in a minute. So if you think about another, parallel industry, so we've chosen Salesforce here, who you all probably know is a cloud CRM provider. Salesforce was founded in 1999. So that was really the beginning of this transition that we've seen from on-premises to the cloud. In 2009, the global revenues for enterprise SaaS providers was 7.5 billion, right? So that's all SaaS providers globally, just 11 years ago. The end of last year, Salesforce's revenue was more than 13 billion, right? The way that they've done that is not only by disrupting their core market of CRM, but by building an ecosystem which allows them to play into adjacencies. And so there was a really well publicized HBR article about 5 years ago, which at the time estimated that up to 50% of Salesforce's revenues came from API integrations, integrating, Salesforce APIs into customer applications, customer ecosystems, right? So they still had, they had their core business of, selling the seat-based SaaS application, but over time they've broadened their scope and started to attack adjacent industries and adjacent opportunities with new business models. And so I think one thing to kind of think about and keep your eye on within financial services is as we move towards more of an ecosystem and platform-based model within financial services, it's about identifying where those adjacencies are. Because it's not just going to be, giving loans and, providing checking accounts, savings accounts, overdrafts, so on and so forth. There will be other adjacencies that financial services providers will be able to tap into and monetize around data, around use of their own platform, if they're kind of seen as leaders in that space. So that's something that I think is a really exciting feature of the next phase of financial services. So last one here, around consent-driven frameworks. And what I'm talking about here are things like open banking, open accounting. This has been interesting because here, I'm from the US where regulation is seen as a kind of dirty word. But this is an example where regulation was really a catalyst for innovation. You saw this new paradigm on how customers are able to share their data with trusted third parties as a result of a regulator, right? So there have been some questions around trust. There are, people who are disappointed by the rate of adoption. My take on this is that, the reason why we haven't seen quicker adoption is because, fundamentally there is this tension between trust and levels of personalization. But more importantly, people need to remember that things like open banking and open accounting are fundamentally a utility. And so, in order to drive adoption, people need to move from, feature to product. So, it can't just be something like, I'm going to give you all my data so that you can visualize it for me in an app. That's a feature. I need to know that by giving you my data, I'm being provided with a meaningfully different experience, product, terms, price, choice, whatever it is, right? So we need to kind of make, really understand this distinction between features and products. And I think that's something that, still needs to be figured out a little bit in the realm of consent-driven data, because the value exchange needs to be extremely, extremely clear if you want to overcome that trust barrier. So here's an example from Dropbox. In the interest of time, we'll skip over this. I guess final takeaways for me, because I know I'm about 5 minutes over time. The role of technology in financial services is changing because what's possible has changed, right? So now that we know the art of the possible has expanded because of technology, there's been a knock-on impact in terms of business models, in terms of the competitive landscape, in terms of the relationship with the customer. If you then think about, where technology has moved within a financial services context, it's become much, much more important. It's moved from the back office to much more being customer facing and front office oriented. So that means that for everybody on this line who's making an investment in their careers and their own professional development and skills and really doubling down in this area of technology, your market value is going up, right? Because you're not just going to be seen as somebody who can build something to make a process more efficient. Now the whole customer experience and product proposition is really being enabled by this technology layer. And so you're going to become creators of product. You're going to become people who understand the relationship with the customer. You're going to be people who build new ecosystems and ways of consuming products. So that's really, really exciting, and something that I'm incredibly excited to see continue to play out over the next 5 or 10 years. Last point I will make is if you haven't read this article, I would highly suggest it. It's a few years old, by William Barnett, who's a professor at Stanford. And the reason why I've included this is because your value is not just in your technical skills. Technology is nothing without the right mindset and the right cultural conditions in order to implement it. And so how you need to equally be thinking about all of the soft skills that you bring, and all of the your ability to kind of experiment and move quickly, and that sort of agile mindset in order to create change, particularly within big organizations. So if you haven't had a chance to read this article, please do. I know I'm over time. I hope that was useful, and thank you very, very much for your attention.
Great, thank you so much, Justin. That was really, really interesting. So lots of interesting discussion points will come out of that. But let me next invite our panelists just to introduce themselves, give us a quick talk about their backgrounds, covering everything from what your company does to also your personal development journey as you built your company. So let me hand over first of all to Anne, please.
Hi, great, thank you. Name is Anne Juliano, founder of Muse. We service the small and medium-sized businesses here in the UK. We help them look at their short-term cash flow by connecting into their accounting and banking packages. And if they have any issues, we provide funding. This came out of a frustration I had on the first business I launched in 2014, where I spent about 2 days a week managing cash flow. And the more I looked into it, I realized it's something that a lot of business owners grapple with. It's about 10 billion of lost productivity here in the UK alone. And there's about 14 billion trapped in invoices that people haven't been paying. So in a time like COVID, it's really been highlighted that businesses need cash to survive. So we're here to try to help with that. The 20 years in finance, both at Credit Suisse and Fortress, before I started my first business in 2014.
Great, thank you. And next, Josh, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hey, I'm Josh Graham. I'm one of the co-founders and CMO of Airtime Rewards. Airtime Rewards is a loyalty and rewards program. And we work with major retailers in the UK and help them to incentivize customers to shop with them in both an online and in-store capacity. What's different about our loyalty and rewards service is that we work with all the major telcos in the UK, and our members earn cashback and rewards to discount the cost of their mobile bills. We are playing in the sort of intersection of rewards and loyalty and fintech, and we've developed technology with Visa and MasterCard to essentially enable our members to earn rewards when they transact with their typical payment cards within our retailer stores. So a really slick and seamless way of tracking a consumer's transaction in a typical bricks and mortar store without the need for any real heavy lifting tech work or capex. We've done all of that with Visa and MasterCard at the payment layer. We've been going about 4 years now. Journey's been tough. we've sort of first 2 years were quite slow, and then we were able to ramp up. We were a little bit before our time in the technology space, and that's sort of come to fruition in the last year or so, and we've seen real growth. We're about 1 million members now, and we've got about 80 to 90 major retailer partners in the UK.
Great, thank you, Josh. So I'm going to now guide this facilitated discussion / debate, but I also want to welcome the audience once again to please type in your questions using the chat or question function that's on your right-hand side in the menu of the GoToWebinar control panel. I think, yeah, well, the C word is on everyone's mind, so I'm going to jump straight in with that in mind, and just wondering for both of you, what is kind of the major pain point on your mind at the moment? So Anne, you rightly mentioned that cash flow is the focus for everyone now. So what's the major pain point you're dealing with running your business at the moment?
There's been, it's I guess, twofold. Number one was getting everyone in their homes and safe and out of the office, and managing kind of that change of environment and keeping up with productivity. I think what we've found is that we've been able to keep productivity up, but unfortunately the hours and the time of the day has just increased, where you're already a startup working lots of hours. Adding more on either side has been a bit of a challenge, but it's been great. We've done some fantastic kind of like team building things, once or twice a week to kind of relax the environment a bit. The big business challenge for us is that things are changing on almost a daily basis with government announcements and how funding is being provided. So one day we'll have a lot of people coming towards us looking for help, and then the next day the tide kind of goes out. So it's managing that situation and kind of figuring out which fires are the most important to help.
The same question.
I think for us, we obviously work with major retailers, and everybody watches the news. It's probably, and the hospitality sector, so two of the probably most hard hit industries, globally by the pandemic, especially the retailers with a store network. So we've had the challenge of retailers having forced closures, some of our chains of restaurants having to close down for months. All the issues you face there with those brands and retailers not trading the way they would do has impacted us. But we have helped them to shift their customers that we would generally incentivize in stores onto their online platforms as well, to support revenues in that method, which has been great. And we're hoping that coming off the back of the pandemic, with the high street beginning to reopen and consumer confidence beginning to restore, we can help drive customers back into store when the time's right, and help those retailers recover after a really, really difficult trading period. And we're also seeing some benefits. We're a performance-based rewards program, and that means that retailers don't pay us a penny until we help them incentivize a sale for them. So there isn't any huge overheads of working with us as a partner. And I think a lot of brands and retailers now are going to be looking at those types of partnerships to cut back on unnecessary cost and make sure everything is in a performance type relationship. So it's been a difficult and challenging few months. We've learned a huge amount about the business during this period, and we've definitely become much more robust off the back of the experience. And without it, we probably would never have learned as much about the company as what we have in the last couple of weeks. So we've seen it as a bit of a challenge and a learning curve, and we've sort of come out of it stronger, we hope.
No, and it's a very topical point, and it also ties into one of the questions that's been asked regarding the new normal and employment status. So I just want to broaden that question out a bit more, and just talking more generally about new skills and knowledge, and even cultural changes as you're bringing together your teams to work in different ways. Because I think the current environment is almost like a resilience test for so many. So have there been any particular elements of the change of your work environment that you think are important for our listeners to be thinking about as they're also thinking about what skills to learn or how to change or adapt to the current situation?
We, as a business, we've adapted quite well. You're always worried as a founder or senior person in the business of when you're not all in the office, how productive are you as a business, how efficient you're going to run. But actually, after the first week, we were really confident that we'd be able to sort of do this for a couple of months. Luckily, we're a digital business, and I always say we were sort of working remotely while being in the same office, because all the products and services you use, you know, it's all digital. So actually, you don't have that across the desk sort of communication within the team, which does present challenges. But I think we've actually found a super efficient way of working together as a business, and we've learned a lot working as a team, and we probably work better actually at home in the current circumstances. We've really refined our approach. I think any key skills to learn in this process were just, you know, the digital suite of services that are out there that connect ourselves together. Slack, Google Suites, all of those tools that you can work collaboratively without being in the same room really help. And I think anybody that will be listening now, I think, you know, use the time to learn some of those skills, because it's, you know, the digital workplace is going to be very, very different from now on. It will never be the same. And I think a lot of businesses will move to more of a remote working mindset and approach. And I think that's definitely the way to go.
I would definitely second that with regards to like the Slack, G Suite tools, things of that sort. You know, it's something that we've had as an organization before this has occurred, but it's really become an amazing channel for us to keep up to date with everyone and keep progress moving quickly. I found that probably those employees that are a bit more mature and not used to using these tools suffered quite a bit and found it a bit overwhelming. So from the standpoint that you can get adjusted to the different tools that are out there, you know, learn how to use them successfully, I think it will make a big deal or a big difference. And I have to say, I'm a people person. I love seeing people, being in the office and chatting and having those sidebar quick conversations that you don't get when you're working at home or in a closet like I am. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming next. You know, I don't think it's going to be, as Josh had said, like, you know, the environment's changing. Like, I don't think it's going to be full time for everyone, but you know, it'll be nice to have some kind of hybrid between the two, so that we do get that personal communication.
Definitely.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say I definitely second that. I definitely miss the water cooler moments and just seeing people. And apparently I read that there's a new phenomenon of Zoom fatigue, which I know I've definitely experienced. Too many online meetings back to back. That's kind of
we've tried to curb our Zoom and Google Hangouts time. I think there's two phases. The first phase is you sort of having so many meetings back to back, and you're not sort of being really hard and efficient with your time, and a 10-minute conversation lasts 20-30 minutes, whereas now we're trying to be super constructive. Okay, let's set the agenda there. Let's not spend too much time with these, you know, conference calls, and get back to doing the day job. And I think we've definitely learned more, and we were wasting time in the first month or so, whereas now we've got a better way of working together, which helps our sort of fatigue and probably a bit of our mental health as well.
Yeah, very topical. Okay, so we have another question that's come in on the topic of open banking. So I think Justin touched on that a little, but it'd be great if you could both speak on the impact of open banking on your business models. And then also the question focuses on adoption, maturity, and value generated from utilizing open banking.
Okay, I can take that first. So at the moment, we have technology with Visa and MasterCard that we've developed, which helps us sort of track, incentivize our members' purchases with retailers. So we ask our members to link their cards when joining our service. But in the next 6 to 10 months, we're looking to integrate open banking into our platform and program, whereby not only members will link their card, but they'll link their bank account. And what we'll do through that feature is unlock an additional variety of services and features for the customer. A lot of our retailer partners want to be able to understand our customers, purchasing behavior more closely. And through open banking, we can begin to sort of, understand those trends more and be able to offer them more relevant rewards and incentives based on their previous spending behavior. We've held off in the last month, so 6 months or so, because we felt it's been quite new. And there's been a bit of sort of nervousness around adoption and data, and I think that's fully understandable. But we think with the impacts of COVID and this forced digital behaviour, where we're all transitioning to more of a digital banking mindset, actually our customers are going to be more likely to embrace a new service that's using open banking. And that should help us add additional values for our retailers, but also our users. At the moment, it's all about timing for us, and we felt like in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do.
For us, we currently use open banking. It's one of the cornerstones of our credit underwriting process. So we link both into your bank accounts and your accounting packages. What that does is, number one, for the user experience, allows you to aggregate all your bank accounts in one place and search among them for transactions. As a business owner, I've spent hours doing this on my own, trying to use the software provided by the high street banks, and it was a really frustrating experience. So it's meant to improve that user experience, but then in addition, it also helps us with our credit underwriting, allows us to get to decisions much faster, also allows us to do the proper credit controls in an incredibly quick period of time, where traditional lenders will usually ask for paper statements and go through that when they're assessing credit. We can just pull the information and know right away exactly what that credit quality is looks like. So I do see a huge, future in that, because what it will allow lenders to do is to get more accurate pricing and faster responses, where traditionally it would take 5 weeks to get back to someone on whether or not they can get credit for their business. We're looking to do that within seconds. Right now we're in about a couple day turnover period. So.
Fantastic, great. Okay, and then we have another question now focusing on the impact of COVID-19. So I'll just elaborate on that question a bit more. So from the perspective of competition, or how traditional banks as well as startups are adapting their value proposition to the needs of, or existing needs or emerging needs of consumers. I also wanted to throw in the topic of the flight to quality. So of course, for those of us from a banking background, we experienced that during the last crash, the flight to quality, where everybody felt more comfortable felt more comfortable going to the bigger banks where they felt their money would be safe. I'm just curious also what you think might be happening at the moment with how institutions are reacting to COVID-19, and also how consumer behavior is changing.
So I'll start with the flight to quality. It's actually been kind of, from my experience, a bit the reverse. Instead of going to, businesses going to the larger banks as that flight to quality, it's actually banks being more selective on who they're going to work with. And you really saw that within the first 5 weeks of COVID. Only or less than 2% of over 300,000 businesses that applied for government funding were receiving it. And the companies that were receiving it were really the top top-notch clients. Nothing within kind of the small and medium-sized businesses were addressed. So I'd say it highlights an issue that there's really kind of a space that's really underserved and in need of help. We've been lucky to be able to continue to provide within that space, and that's been a bit of where our attractions come in, but I think you're going to continue to see that, especially in September, October, when government funding seems to loosen up a bit.
Yeah, I think all signs point to FinTech hopefully being a standout performer during and beyond the COVID pandemic. I think as trends sort of accelerate, I hope more consumers and businesses adopt FinTech open banking products, just as things move more digital. I guess the main worry is the funding gap potentially now with young FinTech businesses needing to raise capital investment and that potentially drying up in the next year or so. The worry is that new businesses coming through and existing companies that are maybe lost leading in the sector are going to struggle to raise that investment, which could sort of suppress some of the innovation in the industry. Really hope not, but I guess that's going to be a challenge, and most FinTech startups and businesses are typically expensive to fund and don't turn a profit or become financially stable too quickly, and they're going to need that investment to sort of get through into the next stage and to grow into probably a main player in the industry in the next few years.
Okay, and then we have another question, actually, which ties into one of my favorite topics, financial inclusion. So this question actually talks about the different demographics and alludes to the fact that some people are not using the internet as readily because of issues such as fees, and even, yes, the traditional challenge of the age demographic and comfort around using FinTech apps and solutions. So I'm just curious, for both of your businesses, how are you making your products financially inclusive, or even what does financial inclusion mean to you, and should maybe the government be doing more to help get more people engaged in FinTech?
For us, our service is entirely free for the end user. No cost to sign up, no monthly fees, etc. And we obviously help our members save money as well, because they earn rewards and are incentivized to shop with our retailers. So for an end user, there's no cost as such. We charge the retailer like a performance fee, for accessing our membership and for us driving our members to shop with them. So it's quite a wide offering. Anybody can sign up, anyone can join, as long as they've got a smartphone. And we do have a web proposition as well. So we're trying to make it as inclusive as possible, and I think the end benefit is a financial gain for our end members, which is nice. So I say, yeah, that would be our main point on it, to be honest. And our key focus is never to charge the end user. We want it to be a free service and to provide only benefit for our users and members.
So when COVID hit, we dropped all our fees on our cash flow forecasting tools, which are available through Android and iOS. And rationale being that I think businesses really need to know what the short-term cash flows looks like, and if there's any way that we can help with them to project it, we want to be there to help. So we've dropped our fee structure. We will charge if we're lending, which is, I think, normal. If we're available on as an app and also over the web. And some of our clients who are not as tech enabled, we will do a manual process with. So we've onboarded clients and had kind of that direct sales relationship as you would with any kind of traditional lender at this point.
Okay, that's great. And now just reflecting on some of the points that Justin had raised, and I think he raised a lot of interesting things. Everything from the power of ecosystems and platforms as a way to consume financial services, using platforms to create adjacencies, and the example of Salesforce using the API as an inroad into adjacent industries, unbundling of services, whereby we have platforms such as Monzo curating other providers who can provide other related services for their clients' needs. And then the innovation race is what I like to call it. So often we assume that it's startups leading, but actually there are big corporations that are having even more impact, possibly because of their network effect. We spoke about the challenges of adoption, of course, open banking helping to lubricate the wheels of adoption. But I'm just curious, from what you're seeing in the wider fintech world, I guess I'm almost asking for predictions, but are there any interesting fintech plays or financial services providers that are providing solutions that you think are quite interesting or innovative at the moment? So personal favorite.
Personal favorite, I'm not sure. I think obviously a big fan of the challenger banks and what they're doing and the transparency around managing your money, and we integrate into some of those banks as well, and it's been a hugely seamless process to integrate, all API led. You're not integrating into a big old archaic bank. It's really light touch and simple for a partner to plug into their platform. So I really do hope that the digital banks do well out of this. Yeah, I hope that, you know, as more people become more digital, the banks will become more successful off the back of that. In all these times of change, we accelerate, don't we, through maybe a year or two of uncertainty. And I hope that, you know, a big group of consumers that didn't bank digitally, you know, in the last couple of years are now starting to look at that as the way forward, because the benefits to consumers are huge. We just need to sort of see that shift towards that mindset and adoption, really. So I would definitely say with the challenger banks, Monzo is a favorite of mine. We're going to do well out of this and become successful.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think definitely consumer habits have changed, and I think probably for the better with regards to some processes, like opening a bank account, for example, has become much more accessible to do it, or much more acceptable to do it without going into a branch. I think the same has come out with the lending and the access to the government funds. You've seen that an enormous amount have come through platforms where historically that would have been handled kind of in the branch. And so I think you'll see a lot of growth with those types of players.
Okay. Okay, so this is the last call to audience members in the remaining 5 minutes of our panel discussion to ask your questions now, so that I can include them within the remaining 5 minutes of our panel discussion. So I've got a question. Of course, we're sitting in London, not that we have a choice because you can't travel anywhere, but with London being the European capital of investment from a fintech perspective, just curious on your thoughts as to what London can do to retain that position, and also if you think there are any other cities that are vying for the crown. So whether that's in Europe, of course, or even outside of Europe, because of course, before the C word, we had the B word. So Brexit was the trending word before that. So I'm just curious as to what you think your thoughts, the impact of Brexit would be on London as the fintech capital of Europe.
I think to preserve London's spot in as a financial capital of Europe, would fintech capital of Europe, obviously we need the access to funding. We need investors to be open and embrace new businesses coming through in the market and to support their growth. That's obviously crucial. What the government can do to help that, I'm not sure, but they have been supportive to smaller businesses in this period, and maybe they can help with that moving forwards. the other element is access to skills and young talent. Hopefully the government can maybe nurture more young tech talent within universities and schools and academia, to make sure we have young stars of the future coming through and coming into these businesses that can drive them further forward, because we're not necessarily going to have the skill set coming in is easy from further afield. We need to nurture more homegrown talent in that sector, and I think they will be two of the main things. Will be investment and the skill set to get through the next couple of years that are going to be challenging for businesses in the UK, in Europe, and further into the next couple of years after that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think from a separate note on kind of staffing, it does open up the question of going outside of London, going outside of the UK. Tech talent is really expensive within the UK to hire. And historically, we've wanted people quite close to the office to be able to have that personal relationship. With things changing and the fact that funding is going to be a bit more challenging in the environment ahead, it's hard not to start looking elsewhere for kind of that talent.
So yeah, TBC post coronavirus. Anyway, we'll see. Okay, so more questions coming in, which is great. So one specifically for Josh. So what is your sense of trust from your users, or do you have an approach to be more trusted?
Yeah, I think we are trusted. We do a lot of work around keeping our customers' data private and secure. We never share that with anyone else. That's one of our ultimate priorities really, is to make our service as secure and as private as possible. We do have trust in that we get a very low drop-off rate from our membership. Not many members use our service. We're fully PCI compliant, so we're trusted to hold card information and process transactional data. And we're going through an ICO sort of data accreditation at the moment, which is another step in the right direction to making sure that we have the relevant process in place of our business to keep our customers' data secure, and we can use that then to build more trust with our members.
Great. And actually, it'd be interesting, Anne, to hear from your perspective whether trust has been a barrier to any of your prospect clients using your services, or has anybody given you any feedback on any issues to do with trust and privacy?
It's a good question. It's not something that someone's going to outright tell you, I don't think. You'll more see it within your numbers and kind of the questions that you're asking. Given that we're looking to help and provide funding where needed, and like I've been FCA regulated for the last 20 years, have that institutional background. We are authorized by the FCA for our open banking licenses and the ICO and what have you. So I think you've got the accreditations there, but also there's that need from the client. And I think as long as they feel comfortable that we can do it in a way that's helpful for them, I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, two more questions before we round off in the next few minutes. There's a question about asking, how do fintech firms help distribute government funds? I'm not sure if that's within your remit, but does anybody want to talk to that question? If not, I'll move on to the next.
We've seen a few of these fintech firms act as platforms and originators for the government and to triage some of the business. But at the end of the day, it does still look like the bigger lenders are behind it, from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then a final question. So what are the challenges fintech firms are facing in this particular time? Are there any disadvantages compared to traditional financial institutions dealing with this current environment?
I think the challenges would be funding potentially, and any drying up of potential investment in these businesses would be a bit of a worry for myself and other businesses I think see coming through in the industry. I think there's a huge positive potentially for fintechs. I think there's going to be a huge swathe of consumers adopting and buying into these services in the next near future, to be honest. But I would say do some of the fintechs have the necessary resources to ride the storm, I guess, and make it through the next sort of 6 to 12 months on a short runway and potentially having less customers. So I'd say that would be the big risk. But I think coming off the back of that, I think we will definitely be in a better position from a consumer's point of view and their approach to adopting these new services down track. I really think that.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. The biggest struggle right now is you're dealing with marketing spend quite significantly different than the bigger players. The opportunity is where the bigger players are falling down. Potentially people are searching and searching around more to find solutions. And in that way, I think that becomes the opportunity for the fintechs.
Great. Okay, thank you so much for sharing and answering those questions as well. I think that's a great way to round us off. So I will hand back to the lovely Nzube to give us some closing remarks.
Thank you so much for this. So first of all, thank the audience for their attention. I'd like to thank the panel, both Josh and Anne, and Justin, who had to drop off earlier, for delivering the keynote, and obviously, last but not least, Mame-Yaa for moderating this and bringing it all together. So my chair is on the line. I think he wants to give some closing remarks, but Dalim, do you want to jump in, or should I give the final closing remarks? I'll give the closing remarks. So as part of the mission of the BCS, we obviously promote and advance the education and practice of computing for the benefit of the public. We are a members-based organization. We have several special interest groups, including a financial institutions, financial applications group. So if any of you are interested in membership, you can look up our website, bcs.org, and sign up to become a member. We'll be hosting a lot more events like this over the next few weeks. Thank you again for participating. And if you have any other final questions or comments, please send us an email. Thank you so much.